Welcome to the Conscious Radio Network. Become enlightened, have fun, and tell all your friends and family to share with everyone they know. You can watch us on YouTube and Rumble while following us on Facebook, or find us on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Our podcasts can be found on Libsyn, iHeart, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and more. Most of all, remember to go to our official website at consciousradionetwork.com for past episodes, future shows, and scheduling. We also want to welcome our international audience. Don't stop now. Enjoy the community. Subscribe or follow today.
This is the Conscious Radio Network.
Good day, everybody, wherever you might be on the spaceship we call Earth. Welcome to Conscious Radio Network's weekly podcast, The Seance. And this is our special Before the Veil series. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Paul Meckes. If this is your first time tuning in, please click like, subscribe, share, comment. And don't forget to follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. And also don't forget to support us on Patreon at Project_Truth. Links are in the show description. Today, are you ready for retirement? Strategies for a secure future. Today, a certified professional coach and owner of Conflux Retirement Coaching, specializing in non-financial retirement life planning. With 25 years of corporate sales leadership experience, she guides clients through a fulfilling retirement transition, focusing on the well-being, identity, and positive aging. She holds advanced credentials from the Retirement Coaches Association and Positive Intelligence. Let's welcome to the show, or the seance, Wendy Leggett. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Dr. Paul.
Pleasure. Honored for you to join us today. And this is something that I'm starting to look at, retirement. Everybody seems to be worried about the financial side, but then financial also kind of, that seems to be the biggest worry. What is the biggest the question that mostly comes to you or people ask you about preparing for retirement?
Yeah, such a great question. And you're right that finances is what comes to people's minds. You know, that's top of mind. That's out in the media. That's what we hear all the time. When clients come to me, they know that my focus is on all the rest of it, you know, our whole selves that go into this next life chapter. And so what comes up for them is like, okay, what's that going to look like? You know, we hear that there's leisure travel, endless weekends on one side, or this feeling of loss and aging and one foot in the grave at the other. And so people know that there has to be more, and there has to be something that feels like they matter and why they get up in the morning. So that's really what comes to mind when people come to me is, what does that look like? Help me. Yeah.
Especially picking the right time. What is the right time? I mean, what is that's got to be an individual thing. But in your opinion, what do you think right time is?
You're so right about that. I mean, I think it really starts with defining, like when you were saying retirement, you know, what does that mean to you? You know, what are you retiring to? What are you retiring with? How do you define retirement? Because so oftentimes people buy into that idea that at a certain age, they're supposed to retire or that they should be doing something. And we know that those are external forces. And so we need to dig deep and say, well, what is it that I want to do in this next life chapter? If I'm gratified in the work that I do and I'm able to continue doing it and I've got great balance, then your time isn't right for retiring. But if your time is that, you know, I really want more, or I no longer engaged in this, or I feel passionate about something else, then those are the signals that it's your time. So, you know, for a lot of people, traditionally, it is in that late 50s, early 60s, mid 60s. But I was doing a presentation, a gentleman afterwards came up and said, you know, I love what you're doing, and I definitely want to work with you when I decide to sell my business, but I'm not ready yet. And he was 91.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I I know today some friends of mine, honored to call friends, and in their 80s, going into their 90s, and still working, still enjoying, and they enjoy to work. They enjoy working. I mean,
Yes.
it's not that they don't have any hobbies, but they enjoy working.
Yeah, I mean, I find working really gratifying too. So I'm a retirement coach, but I don't advocate to retire,
Yeah.
and I don't personally have those plans. I mean, sometimes decisions are taken out of our hands. And so, of course, we want to have a runway to retirement regardless. But I think it is making that intentional decision, Dr. Paul, rather than buying into, what everybody else is telling us or what the messaging is out there.
Yeah. Yeah. That narrative that you gotta work to a certain age in order to collect certain benefits, and yeah, it's just
Yeah, and you're right. There is the reality, there is the financial piece of it, but so often we equate finances with happiness, and we know that those two don't, they don't guarantee one another. And so, really having a more open mind, a more mindful approach to what is important to me, because I've had clients who say, "Oh, I can't afford to retire," but when we really start to look at it from that financial point, which I don't, but their mindset around their finances, what do they really need? What's really important to them? Letting those priorities really bubble up to the surface.
yeah, yeah. So let's get into Conflux Retirement Coaching. How is this scaled? How does this operate?
Yeah, so I work mostly with individuals, couples, groups, but I love the one-on-one. I love because everybody's story, like you said, is different, and so it's really critically important to me that I'm honing in on what is vitally important to someone, what's coming up for them, and by doing that, then I can really help support them in making their own discoveries and those things that resonate for them. So that's my approach. It's not in yeah, when you ask scale, that's how I reach out to my clients.
Yeah,
And work
yeah.
with them.
So it's not necessarily the financial aspect of it. It's helping guide someone through basically trying to find out kind of find out who they are, what they like, who are you, and what can we find? I don't know. Maybe you could definitely explain it better than I am.
Yeah. That I think that's such a great question because people so often think, wow, I've never heard of retirement life coaching. I've heard about financial advisors and wealth managers and things, but there's this whole other side because as I mentioned earlier, we do bring our whole selves into every chapter of our lives, including retirement. There's a template for a lot of these milestone moments. When we think about if we chose from high school to go into college or into our careers or buying a home or becoming a parent or having a spouse. All of those are significant transitions, and most of them have templates. We know that when we're in school that we need to take certain classes, we need to get certain grades, we need to have certain extracurriculars to get into college. Well, when it comes to retirement, yes, the financial piece is critically important. But just like going into college, you're not going to just choose a college based on what you can afford. You're going to choose someplace that really connects with your course of studies or the kind of community that is of interest to you or, any number of things. And it's the same with retirement. Yes, finances are critically important, but there's so much more. And so what I work with clients around is that so much more, is that idea that, for example, defining, like I said, what does retirement mean to you so that you start to have that vision of what this next chapter looks like for you. And then what feels purposeful, not finding purpose with that overwhelming feeling that sometimes people have, but that idea of feeling purposeful, feeling that you matter, feeling that what you do to contribute to yourself and to those you love and to the community and to the world is important because as human beings, that's so vitally important. And then really moving into, okay, what do I take with me from my career in that transition? What do I leave behind? And a number of other factors that I'm happy to speak to. But it is that idea of digging deeper and not just looking at that transfer of roles from career to retirement, but that internal shift, that transformation, that if we allow for it and we reflect upon it and we live into it, then we can really see that next chapter as one that really is filled with a lot of opportunity and possibilities.
Mm. What are some of the common misconceptions about retirement planning?
Well, the biggest one, I think, is that if you have the money, that you're going to have happiness, and so I think that's one of the biggest ones. Another is that it's going to be on one end of the spectrum or the other. Either it's going to be leisure, travel, endless weekends, or on the other end of the spectrum, it's going to be loss, and it's going to be aging, and it's going to be one foot into the grave. And so what I really want to do is bring this into balance. So instead of that idealistic view or that pessimistic view, let's enter with realistic optimism. Let's enter with our eyes wide open about what it is that we see for ourselves in retirement, why we're stepping into it, and what it can be for us. And then being intentional about moving in that direction and getting into action.
Yeah, acting upon stuff. What seems to be the biggest fear, though, that people have in making this decision?
About making the decision to retire?
Yeah, obviously, it's probably first one's probably financial, but what seems to be another factor?
Yeah, like after the honeymoon phase wears off, and and the to-do list has been checked, and the bucket list is dug into. It's like, okay, is this all there is? That's the biggest. It's like you're back on a hamster wheel potentially if you haven't really been planful and if you haven't been intentional about what this next chapter looks like. It can feel like Groundhog's Day. We all heard about that unretirement when people went back to work after retiring. And I think, I'm not questioning anybody's decision, but I would wish that people were able to stop and think, well, I retired for a reason. And so did that reason change? And if it changed because, wow, this isn't what I thought it would be cracked up to be, what did you think? And what would make it feel more meaningful or fulfilling for you?
Yeah. What are some, without having to give too much detail, what have been some of the most incredible moments of those that you've helped, like a breakthrough moment?
Yeah, I think for me, I really look at it for each of my clients as those breakthrough moments. And I'm not trying to skirt the question, but I have had it brought up, like, what was the most amazing thing someone did? And I really want to normalize things so that this feels so much more approachable for all of us, because it's kind of like that, they, did an Ironman when they were 88, or, they climbed the summit, twice, or, things like that. And it's like, that's not approachable for many of us, or that makes us feel excluded. And so what I really want to convey is that for each person that does allow themselves to not only dream, but also take the accountability then for those dreams and making them a reality, then there are those breakthroughs. And so I've had clients come to me, generally the ones that are struggling. And I'd have to say this, I don't think people are aware that 1 in 3 struggle in retirement. So there's a good number of people that if they were able to honestly answer when you say, hey, how's retirement going? And everybody says, it's fantastic. What's there not to love? That 1 in 3 would raise their hand and say, I'm having a tough time. And so I think for those that don't have clarity around what this next chapter could be or would be, those are those breakthroughs, because they start to lift that weight. They start to see that, okay, now I'm getting clear on what's important to me. So I've had people come to me saying, oh my gosh, I feel like almost like it's a death in the family to think about leaving my career behind, or I know I'm going to fail at retirement. Those are heavy weights. And so those are the opportunities then that I have to really walk shoulder to shoulder with people and help them not only normalize it, that you're not alone, many struggle, but then also, okay, let's just take it one step at a time. And let's look at what are these difficult emotions that are coming up for you, and what do we need to look at closer, because those are warning signals, or at least they're more information that something's amiss. So how can we dig a bit deeper there, which many people in that retirement age were not raised with positive psychology, raised with this idea that we have to power through, that we have to suppress or we have to ignore our emotions. And so by giving permission to say, not only permission, but really the strength to say, wow, those emotions mean something. They're important. They're signals for me. And so we dig at that, and they're in that safe space where they can. And so opening that up and saying, who am I if I leave my work behind? Because there is that saying, if you are what you do, who are you when you don't? And so when you leave work behind, you can feel like you're leaving pieces of yourself behind. So really being able to say, you know what, this isn't a new book, it's a new chapter. And so you can bring with you all those strengths and passions and capabilities that you had at work, and also be aware of those things that no longer serve you, or maybe they never did, and you can leave those behind. And so really starting off with that power of transitions and saying, what do I need to put an ending to? And what do I really need to reflect on and think about before I move into this new beginning? So I just shared a whole lot there with you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I've encountered people I've known, God bless them, they're have passed since then, that it seemed like they've waited too long. They just kept pushing and pushing because they loved their work so much. They loved their career so much that they just kept going and going and going. And they never gave it any thought to, I think I'm going to retire here or there or whatnot. But a friend of mine just recently passed this year that he retired, but literally like 2 or 3 weeks later, he passed. Not going to mention why, but it hit him so hard that it wasn't a good thing. And and I'm sure he's not the only one. I'm sure there's more people out there that are just waiting to the last minute, to where it's like you're either your health goes and starts to deteriorate, and you just don't want to push it, and you decide to just set aside the label of retirement as just the time to go. What are your thoughts on situations?
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear about your friend. And I think, as you said, that's not so out of the ordinary that people, have pushed and pushed and pushed. And then once they finally let down, everything lets down. And so I feel very strongly that by people having a vision of what's next, and then they have a runway to it. So for all of us, no matter what age or life stage, recognizing that the majority of us are going to retire at some point, either by choice or by circumstance. And so if we then look at it that, okay, so what would that next chapter look like for me? And what do I need to do now, step by step, to move in that direction? So that rather than having one day you're in work and the next day you're out, and then for some, not lasting much longer, let's have that balance. Let's have that larger vision as well, so that we're not just working so hard to then get to this anticipatory time that we haven't really even defined for ourselves. Because as human beings, we need to feel like we matter. We need to feel a sense of connection. We need to feel as though there's a contribution that we're still making. And again, if we don't have that, then when we leave our work behind, we can leave ourselves behind. So it is a matter of looking at that idea of transitions and looking at, okay, when I move from this chapter to the next, what am I going to bring with me, so that we have more of that flow and we have more of that sense of wonder, as well as a sense of understanding and some structure around where we're going next. So I think that that's the piece that oftentimes people think, retirement freedom. But as human beings, we thrive in structure. Each of us is different what that structure looks like. And I'm talking about something different than routine and same old, same old. But we want some predictability. That's our brains work well that way. We just tend to be able to move forward in this world with a little bit of structure. So I think that the two don't marry if we think of freedom and no structure. We need to kind of have some guardrails, or at least some pathways for ourselves. And that's what I help people define.
Yeah. Before we move forward, how can people find you?
Oh, yeah. Well, my company, as you said, is Conflux Retirement Coaching. So they can always go to my website, and there's a way to click and get a hold of me. So Conflux, Conflux, retirementcoaching.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, Wendy Leggett, and you can always email me at wendy@confluxretirementcoaching.com as well. Thanks.
Cool. You're welcome. So speaking, obviously, we're talking about work, and we're talking about flows. Interesting. That's a segue. So what is the work flow that you can share if someone wants to reach out to you and you want to start a process?
I offer a complimentary discovery call. Also, in your show notes, I'd love you to offer to your listeners a little mini workbook. And so by going through that, you're able to spend some time reflecting on what's important to you. And then in our call, if you'd like, we can go through some of the, things that came up when you went through that workbook, or any obstacles or opportunities that you're seeing. But after that discovery call, and we see that there's a connection there and I could be of further support, then it's a matter of choosing how much time right off the top that you want to spend with me. But it starts off with an assessment that gives you an understanding of how you view retirement from a personal, a professional, and a knowledge base. So that's just a really great bird's eye view of some of the things that can help kind of bubble up to the surface issues or opportunities that you're looking at. But from there, then we really embark upon not only defining what does retirement look like for you, but also what your typical day and week in retirement would be if you were able to just map out a perfect day. And then also, if you only had 5 years, if there was no longer that time abundance that retirement provides, but instead it was limited, what would that look like for you? And that allows people to start to really get clear on their priorities. And that to-do list kind of falls away, and the things that are the vital few for them come to the surface. And then we look at if we no longer had time, if there was just 24, 48 hours, would you have any regrets? Would there be things that you wish that you had done? Because now we get to reverse engineer. Now we get to say, hey, I can look at that legacy now and look at what can I do to ensure that I do live my best self and I do present myself in my best way. And so we do step through that as well. And then we go into the areas of what can you bring with you from work into retirement, and what do you need to leave behind, and taking the power of that transition, and then really exploring purpose and saying, what feels purposeful to you? If you look back when you were young, what got you really charged up? Or if nobody cared, what would you be doing? Or, any number of things. So really getting clear on that. We also look at values, and what we know that when our values align with our purpose, then we tend to be much more committed and clear and moving forward. So those are some of the piece parts. But I really, when finishing up with clients, I just want to make sure that they have these building blocks of the essentials for retirement well-being around their emotional, their mental, their social, their spiritual, as well as their physical health. And so it's really giving them this roadmap so that they can, throughout their retirement and into elderhood, keep reflecting back on some of these things that they cited as being important to them and imperatives for them in their life. And so it becomes then a really great foundational piece for people.
Yeah. I can definitely see how the structure works and how it works. I'm being that coach, because you are a coach, because sometimes we need that. We kind of get blindsided. We got the blinders on, and we are narrow-minded. We go into retirement, we can't see all these, and it's creative. It's a creative way of looking at things and strategically looking at things. Of sometimes we don't see the specific, you got obstacles, but we might have these things in our path that can actually, if we look at them in a different way, become a creative. Look at them in a creative and strategic way. We can. Like hobbies, for instance, someone, something like you mentioned too, something that we did in the past, and it just comes like, man, that's a hobby I used to have as a kid, or, as a teenager or something like that, younger adult. I loved doing it. Let's try it out. And yeah.
see where it takes us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is, so much of it is about perspective. It's really about, are we looking at this from that half full or half empty glass? Are we looking at it as an opportunity that gives abundance or scarcity? Is it growth or is it loss? And so it's vitally important that people do build this positive outlook and possibility filled outlook and ability to pivot. And to your point, as we get older, our lives can become more narrow and more defined without giving ourselves the opportunity to stay open and curious and growth minded. And so I think that this gives, again, that pathway to say, these are the benefits to doing this, and this is the way to do it. So many people in that age of retirement, again, don't really look at taking that ownership or taking that accountability for their life. When we're in career, even if we're a business owner, there are things that are defined, and there are boundaries that are either put upon us or that we've instituted ourselves. But when we move into retirement, we can broaden those boundaries if they serve us. But we have to be willing to step in and take ownership and accountability for those decisions. I talk about it as being the CEO of you.
Yeah.
Leading yourself in this next chapter. And when people don't take advantage of that, then they can be kind of phoning it in or being on autopilot or just continuing patterns that they had in the past without really saying, do these align with who I am? And is this bringing my best self forward? And so it is just an incredibly unique opportunity to do that. One that's so different than anything that we've faced in other life chapters. And so stepping into it fully and with eyes wide open is just vitally important.
Yeah. And this show is global. So I mean, anybody who has internet and YouTube or anything is global. So I want to speak to, we're now speaking more to the global influence, the global audience. Is there's so many cultures out there, there's so many societies out there that it's sad to see it, that they don't recognize or pay too much close attention or energy or resources to the aging community, the older community. It seems like they're just left aside. And when it comes to employment, I mean, there's some industries out there that do hire no matter how old you are, but it just seems like the majority doesn't. And I think it's an important thing that we should change our way of thinking when it comes to there's always something for the aging community, the aging population to do. What are your thoughts on the global society and some of these cultures that don't recognize the aging population?
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty disparate as we look at, across the globe, and even in the US, where our elders are not revered the way that they were, generations ago. And I think in some cultures they still are, and they're looked at for their wisdom and looked upon with respect. Whereas in other cultures, there's such an anti-aging move afoot that we stop seeing people. And I've had clients say, oh, I feel invisible. And to that, I would say, I think it's double, there's two factors. One is your own accountability. And when clients say to me, I feel invisible, I really invite them and challenge them to say, well, are you invisible? What is it that's allowing you to feel that way? Because if we don't bring ourselves forward, then it's understandable people won't see us. So we have to take that accountability and assert where we can. But at the same time, yes, there are so many structures and things in place that do hold people back as they age and don't allow and become exclusive to them. And so where I see that is, first of all, the aging population is getting much larger. So proportionately, we've never seen it in history where there are so many more people that are in that percentage of aging. So there's so much work afoot around this pro-aging step, approach to things, and really saying that, older adults have not been looked at, and they've been overlooked. And so there needs to be a lot more in the way of societal structures and approaches and even products and things like that. So I think that there is more of a spotlight there. And I think that's why the retirement life planning, there's more of a spotlight there as well, because older Americans older adults across the globe do want more. They don't want to just retire and then expire. They know that, on the average, if somebody does retire at that typical age in the mid 60s, there'll be 20 or 30 more years of living, hopefully. And so that's a third of someone's life. And so we need to demand that we make the most of it, and we have to demand that of ourselves, and we have to demand that of our society as well. But I think the problem that you raise is a very real one, and I just challenge all of us to make sure that we're not in that camp where we're then spreading that anti-aging message, and that we're doing everything that we can on whatever scale that we can to make sure that we're not a party to that.
Yeah. And we're human, that all of humankind is, we're collectively and naturally, social creatures, and getting involved with the community, I've always felt is, and I see a lot of the elderly getting involved during their retirement. They seem to get out more. They seem to get involved with charities, local community charities, bingo night, go down to the Elks Lodge, or, the Lions Club, or, the Rotary Club, and getting involved with a lot of community stuff. And then it and that helps a lot. That helps as far as psychologically, physically,
Yes,
and emotionally too. That way you don't kind of feel like you're lost, or because so many opportunities can come with that,
Yeah, I mean, there is that epidemic of loneliness that we're experiencing, and so much disconnection. And as people age, that can become even more prevalent. So that idea of connection, as you mentioned, and that we are social creatures, and that's how we thrive, is making sure that we have those opportunities for people, and that takes planning, that takes awareness. It doesn't just happen. People can shut their door and shut themselves away from life. So it is a matter of making some of those overtures, and that effort. I've had clients say, gosh, now that I'm not working, I notice that aside from work, that I really let my friendships go to the wayside. And it's a matter of, but it's never too late. Everyone likes to be reached out to. And so reach back out to those people that were in your life, that were important to you, and start that conversation. And the majority of people aren't going to hang up on you. They're going to welcome that call. And so it's important that we recognize that, and that we put aside some of those unfounded fears or concerns, or again, past patterns, but instead reach out.
Yeah.
And so vitally important, because like you said, from a physical standpoint, an emotional and a cognitive standpoint, we need that communication. We need that connection.
Yeah. So before we wrap things up, again, how can people find you? You got a website. For those who are watching, it's scrolling along the bottom, but for those who are listening, can't necessarily see it. Don't do it when you're driving. But
Yes. At confluxretirementcoaching.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn, and that's Wendy Leggett.
Cool. So to close off the show, what would you like to offer as a takeaway for our audience today?
I shared earlier this idea of being the CEO of you and really leading yourself. And so what I offer up is this idea that we want to create a retirement by design, not default. That this is your next chapter. This is your opportunity, and it's a unique one, as I mentioned. But we have to be planful. We have to go in with insight about what's important to us. So take those steps. Take that reflection time to really think about what's important to me and design that retirement for yourself.
Yeah, very, very important. But Wendy, thank you for joining us today. Very important. And for those out there that just thinking about it, hey, I want to retire early. I just want some ideas. I want to get, kind of brainstorm on this, reach out to Wendy. And you also mentioned a free mini workbook that we can,
Yes.
we'll have put that in our show notes or our show description to reach out to her for. Other than that,
That'd be great.
Yeah. Wendy, thank you very much. Namaste and blessings, my friend. Thank you very much.
Same to you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Conscious Radio Network's The Seance, and we will see you next time.